This year marks the 25th anniversary of democratic rule in South Africa and the end of apartheid. A new generation of Black South Africans who grew up without the limitations of segregation are now transforming the cultural landscape. Special correspondent Fred de Sam Lazaro reports on one chef's quest to bridge the country's racial divide one bite at a time. It's part of our Canvas series on arts and culture.
For these poppers, I'm using pickled jalapenos.
At 35, with 2 best-selling cookbooks and a primetime TV show, Zola Nene is at the top of her game.
And together, we create mouth-watering dishes on Celeb Feast with Zola.
When she first emerged on South Africa's culinary scene in 2009, she says there were few people in professional kitchens that looked like her.
It's a male-dominated industry. So I was very aware that being a female trying to sort of break into this industry was already a hurdle, and then being a female of color was, even a secondary hurdle.
And also when those bubbles sort of touch the oil, then crispy, explosion, deliciousness.
Nene says a sheltered upbringing gave her the confidence to be persistent.
I was never aware of the discrimination that was happening around me. I think that my parents worked really hard to protect us from that.
Nene spent the first 10 years of her life under apartheid, but it was only later in school that she learned about the segregationist laws of the white minority government.
And I remember going home and I was like to my mom, I was like, oh, they're teaching us the most unbelievable stuff. Did this really happen? And that was the moment where my mom was like, okay, now you're learning about it. Let me tell you about the things that we had to go through, the fact that we had to get permission to work in certain neighborhoods.
Nene credits her parents for raising her with the belief that she could do anything she wanted.
It makes me a little bit teary and emotional to think about it. I always feel like there's no real room for me to fail because I've been given so much opportunity. My dad is a completely self-made, self-educated man who comes from extreme poverty.
Her father put himself through school and went to work in the petroleum industry. When Nene told him she wanted to cook, he sent her to England, where she worked in a restaurant in Cheshire.
They saw my eagerness. By the end of my 2 years there, I was head of the pastry section, and by then I realized, yes, this is exactly what I want to do.
She returned to South Africa to study culinary arts, thinking she could focus on her African roots. But she says she found little that was African in the curriculum.
All the teachings are French, so you learn French methods, you learn French basic recipes.
French cuisine and methods may be an aspiration for many chefs and consumers, but she says Black African food is very much in the comfort zone of all South Africans, including whites.
My paternal grandmother was a domestic worker, so a lot of people who potentially run the kitchens grew up with a nanny who was black, who taught, who fed them black foods, yet somehow there's still a disconnect.
So these are your 2 books so far. In her cookbooks, Nene is trying to change that disconnect with recipes that fuse European and her own Zulu and other regional black cultures. One that caught my eye was the pap lasagna. What is the pap lasagna?
Okay, so pap is what we make out of mealie meal, and maize meal is a sort of staple ingredient across all the cultures in South Africa.
Meal.
Exactly. To sort of Africanize a Western dish, I think is really fun. Okay, you got it.
Though her TV show and cookbooks are popular, this type of food remains hard to find in fashionable foodie locations like Cape Town.
They do great brunch on a Sunday, and I love
Nene
brunch.
took
One
us to
chapter in my book is
experience
all about
one
brunch,
of the
so this is-
exceptions.
I'd love to order for us the grits.
South African grits, creamed and with cheddar.
Okay, so I'm going to let you try it because obviously I've had it often.
This is delectable.
It's right, yeah. It's one of my favorite sort of traditional ingredients that I grew up with my mom using and my grandmother using.
Nene says she's proud to have played a role in blazing a trail for other women of color.
There are more female faces, black faces, in the culinary industry for people to actually be like, oh, I can see that's a person that looks like myself. I can do that.
But despite progress, Nene says her country remains a highly unequal society. The rate of black unemployment, for example, is still 5 times that for the white minority. It has economic problems and corruption scandals, but through it all, Nene says, she remains optimistic about South Africa.
Our history may be painful and maybe sordid, but the fact that we've overcome a lot of those things makes us so much stronger as a country. I think it's an ongoing process, this democracy thing.
As it sorts out its myriad divisions, Nene says there's one place all South Africans can come together to bridge them: the kitchen. For the PBS NewsHour, this is Fred de Sam Lazaro in Cape Town.
And Fred's reporting is a partnership with the Undertold Stories Project at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota.